Jessie Woolley-Wilson, it's been some years since you and I shared a stage together, and the world has changed dramatically. Even before COVID, though, one thing that hasn't changed much is U.S. achievement in mathematics. So we get to talk about mathematics with you today, and I'm excited about that. But before we talk about what you're doing in the foundation and mathematics, I'd like to talk about Bill Gates as a kid. What made you fall in love with mathematics, and how did it impact your childhood? Bill Gates, well, I was very lucky. I went to a good public school through 6th grade, and then in 7th grade, my parents decided I should go to a private school. It was a great education. I developed a view that math was fun and interesting. I had very good teachers. The sky was the limit. When I was 13, they put a computer terminal in, and the teachers found it confusing. We did not find it confusing. We took over. And then I did the school scheduling, decided who would be in what class. I put lots of great women into my classes. I never got around to talking to them, but I was planning on it. No, I had a really, almost idyllic high school experience, including the early exposure to computers. My co-founder, of Microsoft, Paul Allen, was 2 years ahead of me, and he kept pushing me. Even when I went off to college, he kept saying, "We're going to miss this opportunity." So he moved out to Boston to encourage me to drop out, and he succeeded. Jessie Woolley-Wilson, well, I'd like to go ahead a few years and think about Bill Gates as a parent. You experienced mathematics through the eyes of your children. How was that experience? Bill Gates, well, you don't want to try to make your kids do the same things you did. That wouldn't be that great. They were also very lucky to get a good education. None of them were computer nerds. One of them is definitely nerdy, but more in history, science, and economics, and not math and computer science, which is probably good. They're all way more sociable than I am, which means you inherit some from your mother, to have a more balanced personality. Anyway, it's been fun going through their educational experience. My eldest daughter is in medical school now. I enjoy going through those slides together and kind of learning. When things seem to have hit a dead end, young people today have more optimism for them. Jessie Woolley-Wilson, do you remember times when they came to you for help in mathematics as a parent? Bill Gates, oh, sure. I love doing math. My younger daughter would always say, "You made it so complicated, and you didn't need to explain this to me to get the answer. Why did you go through that whole general description of angle, side, angle? You could have been done 10 minutes ago?" She just sort of wanted the answer. But no, learning with kids and seeing what's confusing to them, what's easy for them is kind of the ultimate test of whether you know a topic, whether you can explain it. One of my favorite things was teaching calculus to the kids, because I think it's extremely poorly taught. It's a few very difficult concepts, like area under the curve and rate of change. You have to explain why that's so important, and why they have those funny symbols. But yeah, teaching is great. Even now, it turns out the latest technologies are less coding related, and they're more math related. The way that you do these differentials and matrices and things like that, it's actually pretty tough. If you didn't come to computer programming from math, where a bunch of crazy matrix operations are second nature, then you're going to have to go get that background. Jessie Woolley-Wilson. When we think about the last 10 years, maybe even 20 years, we think about all the changes and all the investments that we've made, with a lot of optimism, in things like curriculum, technology, school models, pedagogy. So much change. And yet, mathematics remains a stumbling block for many, many kids, especially the least well-served. What is the foundation going to do differently? You've talked to me a little bit about motivation, engagement, and persistence. Can you tell us a little bit about why that's so important to you? Bill Gates. Well, I'm sure there's broad agreement that all learning things have a huge motivational element to them. If you're insanely motivated, let's say, to learn physics, just read Feynman's books. It's all there. It's not like somebody's putting something online that's some new discovery of how physics works. It's just very hard to maintain that type of mental concentration, and you have to have a reason for doing it. And one thing I even feel a little guilty about in my math education was that I viewed it as a contest to be faster than the other kids and make it look like, well, I don't have to try at all. There certainly are things that are helpful. Tools like Dreambox, which is more than a decade of persistent work, and seeing what works and how do you get people to adopt these things? There are good ideas, at least in the abstract, like a personnel system where you really tell teachers how to work better. That when we've tried to actually implement them, they essentially get rejected. And so what works abstractly and what ends up working in terms of scale in education are different things. You often get fooled that you do things, and you happen to have picked particularly talented teachers, and so no matter what you do with them, when you say, "Here's the money, go do X," then they're like, "Hey, kids, we're going to do X, and let's see if we do better because we've been picked, and it's very important." And you always see some improvement there. But then when you take it to teachers who don't want to do X, it doesn't necessarily scale up. So education, for the entire foundation and for me, personally, given the difficulty of having impact at scale, turned out to be harder than I expected. Whereas weirdly, our global health work, where I thought it would be hard to have impact at scale, it turned out it was actually pretty easy to have impact at scale. Jessie Woolley-Wilson. So let's talk about Bill Gates, the futurist. There have been a lot of sessions during the last couple of days here about AI. In fact, most people couldn't get in. They were standing room only, and there were a lot of frustrated people out there. You and I were talking about AI and the impact you think it could have on learning and on mathematics in particular. Can you share what your thoughts are about the promise of AI, in mathematics in particular, and in general? Bill Gates, AI, ever since the focus became machine learning, has achieved some unbelievable milestones. It can listen to speech and recognize speech better than humans. It can recognize images and videos better than humans. The area that it was essentially useless in was in reading and writing. You could not take, say, a biology textbook, and read it and pass the app exam. Now, you could regurgitate the biology textbook, but in no sense would you call that understanding, or the ability to read and encode the knowledge in a kind of semantic way. There were these debates, as we scaled up large language models, about how much emergent richness would come out of that. I was actually one of the people who didn't think as much would come out of it. Even when I looked at GPT-3, I was like, nah, it still must have some upper bound there. It was last summer that I challenged the OpenAI Microsoft group. I said, hey, when you can pass the app biology exam, bother me, but in the meantime, I'm going to work on malaria and TB and HIV. Because I'm not sure. And you know, a few months after I said that, they then came to me. We had this big dinner where they showed it not just barely passing, and not just, oh, I guess that's a good answer, but blowing the questions away. There were a few that it didn't get right, that later we learned how to do with certain types of very abstract reasoning, including mathematics. Jessie Woolley-Wilson, Climate Change. Bill Gates, yeah, we've got climate change. We've got polarization, populism. We've got a war that somewhat involves countries with nuclear weapons. And so, it can feel a bit challenging. I will say, though, on the innovation side and on the health side, the edtech side, the climate side, the pace of innovation, even before you get to I, is much faster than I would have expected. And a lot of that is great universities in the United States, great companies in the United States. The startup mechanism, even now that valuations have come down a little bit, the amount of money for that great work is incredible. And so, when I look at every area of emission and climate, there are great companies out there. My breakthrough energy is in over 100. I'd say there's over 200 that are doing really amazing work. Likewise in health, in the rich world, which I'm not directly involved with, there are things like obesity and cancer and even aging where the progress is pretty phenomenal. In the foundation realm, having a genetic cure so that you don't have HIV, or you don't have sickle cell, we see a path, a decade-long path. To bring that down to be only a few $1,000s instead of millions of dollars that we have today. So I'd say human ingenuity is going to surprise us on the upside. The messiness of getting these things into the world, the real world, a world with populism and tough geopolitical tensions. It's always going to be interesting, and there will be gigantic setbacks, including things like the Ukraine war. The next decade for the very poorest countries, where their finances are in tough shape, won't see as much progress as we'd like. But because of ingenuity and innovation, I do think the poor countries will have a lot of catch-up over time. And even our dreams about education, even though they've taken a lot longer than we hoped for, that we'll be able to achieve them. Jessie Woolley-Wilson, well, Bill Gates, thank you for sharing your aspirations and your intentions and your wisdom with us. It's my pleasure. Bill Gates, thank you. Subscribe my YouTube channel WPK History.